He lived a quiet life in a small, crowded part of the city where buildings leaned close together and the streets were always full of noise. Every morning he woke up before the sun, washed his face with cold water, and stood by his small window for a moment. He liked that quiet time. It was the only part of the day that belonged to him. He did not think much about love. To him, love was just a word people used when they wanted to feel special. He worked in a small workshop that fixed old furniture. The place smelled like wood, glue, and dust. His hands were rough from years of sanding broken tables and chairs. He liked the work because it was honest. What he fixed with his hands felt real, not like the promises he had seen people break so icily. He had seen too many people get hurt by love. Friends who trusted the wrong people. Relatives who grew distant after marriage. To him, it seemed safer to stay alone. After work, he usually walked home slowly, watching people in the market. He noticed couples laughing, arguing, walking in silence. He wondered how they could feel so much for someone else. He believed feelings were weak things that could not be trusted. He carried this belief like a shield. She lived only a few streets away, in a small house that was always busy. Her days were full of responsibility. Her mother had been sick for a long time, and she managed most of the home by herself. Cooking, cleaning, buying medicine, and keeping a soft smile even when she felt tired inside. She did not talk much about her problems. She believed complaining would change nothing. She worked part-time at a small neighborhood store. It was not a big job, but she treated every customer with care. She believed kindness mattered. She had been disappointed before, not only by people but by life itself. Still, she had not lost her gentle way of seeing the world. Somewhere in her heart, she believed real love was quiet and patient, loud and dramatic. Their lives were moving side by side without touching, like two roads that had not met yet. One evening, power went out across the neighborhood. The whole area went dark. Fans stopped. Lights died. The streets filled with shadows and soft sounds of people talking in confusion. He was returning home from work when the darkness surprised him. He stood still, waiting for his eyes to adjust. She had been sent to buy medicine for her mother. She walked quickly, worried about getting home before the streets became too unsafe in the dark. In the confusion, she tripped over a broken part of the road and nearly fell. He saw her just in time and reached out without thinking. His hand caught her arm, steadying her before she hit the ground. For a second, neither of them spoke. "Are you okay?" he asked softly. She nodded, surprised by the stranger's kindness. "Yes, thank you." The silence between them was not uncomfortable. It was calm. In the darkness, their faces were barely visible, but their voices felt clear. The power did not return quickly. People gathered outside their houses, waiting. He realized they were both standing there with nothing to do. "You should go carefully," he said. "The road is uneven." She smiled a small smile. "I will. Thank you." They walked in the same direction for a short while, side by side. They did not ask for names. They did not share long stories. It was just a small moment in a dark street. Yet something about it felt different. When they reached a crossing, she stopped. "This is my way." He nodded. "Take care." That night, he lay on his thin mattress, staring at the ceiling. He told himself it was nothing, just a simple act of helping someone. But for some reason, her calm voice stayed in his mind. It did not disturb him. It felt gentle. The next few days passed as usual, but he found himself looking at faces a little more carefully when he walked through the market. He wondered if he would see her again. He told himself that such thoughts were foolish, but they still came. She also remembered him, not because he was handsome or impressive, but because he did not ask for anything in return. Many people helped for praise. He did not. That made the moment feel pure to her. A week later, their paths crossed again. He was carrying an old wooden chair to deliver it to a customer. The street was crowded and the chair was heavy. Just as he stopped to rest, he heard her voice behind him. "Careful. It looks like it might fall." He turned and saw her standing there, holding a small bag of groceries. "You again," he said, surprised. She smiled. "Yes." For a moment they both felt shy, like two people who had met in a dream and were now unsure if it was real. "You helped me before?" she said. He nodded. "I remember." "Can I help you?" she asked, pointing to the chair. He hesitated, then slowly lowered the chair. She held one side while he held the other, and together they moved it a few steps forward to a safer spot. "Thank you," he said. "You're welcome." He stood there for a moment longer. "My mother lives nearby," she said without thinking. Then she felt awkward for sharing such a personal detail. He did not laugh or judge. "That's good. It's better when family is close." She looked at him, surprised by how natural he sounded. After that day, their small meetings became more frequent. Sometimes it was just a passing greeting, sometimes a short walk. They talked about simple things: work, the weather, food. Nothing deep, nothing heavy. But slowly, they began to feel comfortable with each other's presence. He liked how she listened when he spoke, even when his stories were dull. She liked how he never pretended to be someone he was not. It was not love yet, not even close. It was something new to both of them. It was the feeling of being seen without being judged. One evening, as they walked a short distance together, she said quietly, "You don't talk much." He thought for a second, then said, "I'm not used to talking about my life." She nodded. "That's okay." He looked at her and felt a strange warmth in his chest. He did not know what to call it. Maybe it was simply peace. When they reached the corner, he stopped. "You should get home. It's getting late," she smiled. "You too." As she walked away, he stood there for a long moment. The street was noisy. People rushed past him. But inside, he felt something slow and steady. He still told himself he didn't believe in love, still believed feelings were risky. But now, without meaning to, he was starting to learn that real connection did not come with loud promises. Sometimes it came in the dark. Sometimes it came with a simple hand reaching out. And sometimes it began with two quiet people walking side by side without needing to say much. That was how it started. Quiet, soft, almost invisible, but very real. Days turned into weeks, and their quiet connection slowly grew stronger, even though neither of them noticed it at first. He continued his work at the small furniture workshop, spending long hours sanding, fixing, and polishing old chairs and tables. The work was tiring, but it gave him peace. Each piece he restored felt like a small victory, a reminder that effort could bring something broken back to life. Life outside the workshop, however, was far from easy. Bills piled up, and he had little time for rest or a thought about anything beyond work. Yet somehow, in the small moments when he saw her smile or heard her calm voice, a weight he didn't realize he carried seemed to ease a little. She, too, struggled. Caring for her mother was not easy, and the burden often left her exhausted. She rarely complained, though inside, she often felt lonely. She would wake early, cook, clean, and manage errands before heading to the store where she worked part-time. Even after long days, she found a way to stay gentle, offering smiles and kind words to customers. But at night, when the house was quiet and her mother slept, she allowed herself a few moments of fear. What if she failed? What if her mother's health worsened? What if she could not handle the growing pressures of life? It was during those nights, alone with her thoughts, that she would think of him. Not in a romantic way yet, but as someone who had, without effort or pretense, shown her a small moment of kindness. That moment lingered in her mind like a candle in the dark. Their paths continued to cross. Sometimes deliberately, sometimes by chance. On one rainy afternoon, he was carrying a repaired cabinet down the narrow street toward a customer's home. Rain fell in sharp sheets, soaking the streets and turning the ground into a patchwork of puddles. He struggled to keep his balance as water seeped into his shoes. She appeared at the corner, carrying an umbrella. Her small bag of groceries clutched tightly. "Be careful," she called out, her voice calm yet urgent. He looked up, startled, and gave a small, grateful smile. "I'll manage, thank you." She stepped closer and offered to help, holding one side of the cabinet steady while he adjusted the other. Together, they moved it safely onto a dry patch of the sidewalk. Neither of them spoke much, but they shared small glances and smiles. In that moment, the rain did not feel heavy, and the street did not feel dangerous. It was just them working together, quietly supporting each other. That evening, he walked home with his clothes damp, but his heart strangely lighter. She, too, returned home thinking about the small act of teamwork, feeling warmth she could not explain. Neither of them knew it yet, but these small moments were the threads weaving, a connection that would grow stronger with time. Life, however, was not always kind. Weeks later, he faced a serious problem at work. A client had refused to pay for a large repair, claiming the work was not done well, even though he had spent hours ensuring every detail was perfect. The argument left him frustrated, angry, and exhausted. He went home, dragging his feet, feeling the weight of disappointment pressing down on him. That evening, he sat by his window, staring at the dim lights of the city. He wanted to give up, to leave the workshop behind, to stop caring about things that seemed to punish effort and honesty. But then he remembered her quiet strength, the way she had stood beside him in a small act of kindness. He thought of her smile, calm and patient. And he realized that maybe, just maybe, there were moments in life worth holding on to, even when everything seemed unfair. She noticed his absence one evening. He had been late passing by the street where they sometimes met. Concern grew quietly in her heart. She wondered if something had happened, if he was all right. The next day, she saw him sitting outside his workshop, head in his hands. Without thinking, she approached. "Are you okay?" she asked softly. He looked up, startled, not expecting her to notice. He wanted to brush it off, to say it was nothing. But something in her calm gaze made him pause. "It's just work," he admitted quietly. She nodded, understanding more than he realized. "Sometimes work can be unfair," she said. "But it's the effort that counts, not what others see." Her words were simple, but they carried a weight that surprised him. For the first time, he allowed himself to talk about his frustrations, and she listened without judgment. They sat in silence for a while, just two people sharing a quiet moment. The noise of the city around them fading into the background. Life continued to test them. She faced her own struggles when her mother's health worsened. A doctor's visit brought bad news, and she returned home feeling helpless. Bills were piling up, and the cost of medicine was more than she could handle. That evening, she sat by her mother's bedside. Holding her hand and feeling tears she had tried to hold back. He noticed her absence from their usual meeting spot and felt an unexplainable worry. Later, when he saw her at the small store she worked at, her face was pale, her movements slower than usual. He approached gently, offering a quiet, "Are you all right?" She shook her head slightly, and for the first time she allowed herself to share a part of her struggle. "It's my mother. She's sick, and I don't know what to do." He listened, not interrupting, not giving advice immediately. He simply stood there, offering his presence. In that silence, she felt a small sense of relief. Someone cared, not because they had to, but because they wanted to. Over the following days, he found ways to help quietly. Sometimes it was carrying heavy bags. Sometimes it was sharing small words of encouragement. And sometimes it was just sitting nearby so she knew she was not alone. He did not expect anything in return. She did not ask for much. But these small acts became their bond. It was not about grand gestures or declarations. It was about showing up even when life made it hard to do so. Slowly, they began to realize that life's challenges did not have to be faced alone. He learned that helping someone else did not weaken him, and she learned that accepting help was not a sign of weakness. Their small acts of care grew into trust, and trust grew into something deeper. They also began to share small joys. On quiet evenings, they would talk about things that made them laugh, memories from childhood, or dreams that felt too far away. He liked how she laughed, a gentle sound that made the world feel less harsh. She liked how he could be serious without being harsh, thoughtful without being distant. One afternoon, they sat on a small bench in the park. Children played nearby, and the smell of wet grass filled the air after a light rain. She watched a small boy chase a paper kite, and he noticed her smile. "You always notice little things," he said quietly. She looked at him, surprised. "I guess I do." He nodded. "It's nice." She smiled again, unsure why his words made her heart feel warm. Life was still not perfect. Bills, sickness, and work pressures continued. Friends and family often did not understand why they spent time together, saying it was foolish to rely on someone they barely knew. But each time life pushed them down, they found strength in their small, quiet bond. They realized that true support was not about words. It was about being there when it mattered. Through these struggles, they began to understand what love could mean. Not the kind shown in movies, loud and dramatic, but a love built in patience, care, and small sacrifices. He learned that love was about presence, about showing up even when it was inconvenient. She learned that love could be quiet, gentle, and strong, not loud or demanding. Even in the darkest moments, their connection gave them hope. When she worried about her mother, he was there. When he felt the weight of failure at work, she was there. They did not fix all problems, but their presence made the world feel a little less heavy. By the end of that part of their lives, they were no longer strangers. They were two people learning what it meant to care for someone beyond themselves. Their bond was still quiet, often unspoken, but it was growing stronger every day. It was not perfect. It was not easy. But it was real, and that was the beginning of understanding what true love could really look like, not in grand gestures, not in promises, but in the patient, steady presence that carried two people through hard times. Together, every day, every small act, every shared moment became part of a story that was just starting. A story that neither of them could have predicted, but one that was slowly shaping their hearts in ways they would never forget. Weeks turned into months, and their quiet connection grew into something neither of them could ignore. It was still not the loud, dramatic love that people often spoke about, but it was steady, patient, and alive in every small action. Life, however, was not ready to make things easy. Challenges kept coming, and each one tested their bond in ways they had not expected. One morning, he received news that a large client had backed out of an order he had spent weeks preparing. The payment he had been counting on would no longer come, and the sudden loss left him feeling a heavy weight in his chest. He had worked hard, stayed honest, and now it felt like effort counted for nothing. He considered giving up on the workshop entirely, but the thought of walking away from something he loved made his heart ache. That evening, he walked home slowly, hands in his pockets, mind crowded with worry. He stopped at a small corner of the street where they sometimes met, and there she was, carrying groceries for her mother as always. She smiled when she saw him, but the smile faltered slightly when she noticed his face. "You look tired," she said gently. "I am," he admitted, his voice low. "Work. It's been difficult." She didn't press for details. Instead, she offered him a small loaf of bread she had just bought. A simple gesture, but one that carried warmth and care. "Here," she said softly, "take this. Eat something." He accepted it with a faint smile, feeling a small comfort he could not explain. In her presence, even problems that seemed too big to handle felt a little smaller. As the days passed, he struggled to keep the workshop afloat. Bills piled up, suppliers demanded payment, and the thought of losing everything kept him awake at night. One day, he sat in the workshop, staring at an unfinished table, feeling hopeless. She came by to check on him, noticing his exhaustion. "You're overworking yourself," she said quietly. "I have no choice," he replied. "If I don't work, there's nothing for me. Nothing to keep the workshop running." She thought for a moment, then quietly offered, "Then let me help. Maybe not with the work itself, but with small things. Food, errands, anything I can do." He hesitated. He was not used to accepting help, especially from someone who had her own burdens. But there was a sincerity in her eyes he could not ignore. He nodded slowly. "Thank you," he said simply. From that day on, she began to quietly support him. She would bring meals, sometimes wait until he finished late work, offering quiet words of encouragement. He did not need to ask, and she did not seek recognition. Each act, small as it was, built a bridge of trust and care between them. Meanwhile, her own struggles were growing. Her mother's health had worsened, requiring more attention and care. Doctors' visits were frequent, and the cost of treatment was more than she could manage. She worried constantly, often late into the night, about what would happen if she could not provide for her mother. One evening, she sat by her mother's bedside, holding her hand and silently crying. He noticed her absence from their usual meeting spot and felt an unexpected worry. He had grown used to seeing her, to the small moments that reminded him life could be gentle, even in hard times. The next day, he found her at the store where she worked part-time. Her movements were slow, her face pale, and worry shadowed her eyes. "You don't have to carry everything alone," he said softly, standing nearby. She shook her head, small, tired smile forming. "I have to. Someone has to take care of her. You don't have to do it all," he insisted. "Let me help. Let me be there." It was not a grand offer, but it was enough. Enough to make her feel less alone, enough to remind her that support could come without asking for it. Slowly, she began to accept his help. He would run errands, pick up medicines, even sit quietly beside her mother while she rested. He never complained, never demanded anything in return. Through these shared struggles, they began to understand a truth that many never see. Real love is shown not in perfect moments, but in how do people stand beside each other when life is hardest. One afternoon, he delivered a repaired cabinet to a client several streets away. She had insisted on accompanying him, partly to help and partly to spend a quiet moment outside the house. As they walked together through narrow streets, the sun warming their faces, she noticed how tense he seemed. "You worry too much," she said gently. "I can't help it," he replied. "There's too much to worry about." "Can't carry everything alone," she said, her voice calm, almost firm. He looked at her, surprised by her confidence. He had always believed he had to manage everything himself. But in that moment, he realized that someone else's presence could lighten the burden, not weaken him. Over time, they shared not just struggles, but also small joys. On quiet evenings, they would sit on a bench in the park, talking about childhood memories, dreams they had once held, or simple observations about the world. He liked how she noticed small things, a flower growing in a crack in the pavement, a child helping an elderly person across the street. She liked how he could stay calm in chaos, think things through without panic, and offer practical solutions to problems. Their friendship began to deepen into something more, though neither of them was ready to admit it. It was not a love built on passion or grand gestures. It was a love built on presence, on patience, and on shared understanding. One evening, a storm rolled in suddenly. Heavy rain poured down, and the streets flooded quickly. She had been sent out to buy medicine, and he worried as he waited near the street corner. When he finally saw her, drenched and struggling to walk, he ran to her, holding an umbrella over both of them as they moved carefully through the waterlogged streets. "Why do you keep doing this for me?" she asked, shivering but smiling faintly. "Because someone needs to," he replied quietly. "And because I want to." Her heart warmed at his words, though she did not fully understand why. In that moment, the rain did not feel cold, and the storm did not feel threatening. All that mattered was the quiet care between them, the small, steadfast bond that had grown without fanfare. Weeks later, they faced another test. He received an opportunity to expand his workshop, a chance to earn more and stabilize his life. But it required him to move temporarily to another city, far from her and from the small life they were building together. He struggled with the decision, torn between ambition and the bond he had begun to cherish. She noticed his hesitation. "Whatever you decide," she said softly, "I will support you. But remember, success is not just about money. It's about what makes you happy, too." Her words stayed with him. He realized that true happiness was not in achievements alone, but in the people who stood beside him through difficult times. He could leave, but he would miss her presence, her quiet encouragement, and the simple moments that had begun to define his days. In the end, he chose to stay, finding another way to grow his workshop locally, rather than chasing opportunities far away. It was not the easiest path, but it felt right. She smiled when he told her, a quiet relief in her eyes, and he felt a deep gratitude for her understanding and support. Life continued to challenge them, but they faced each trial together. She learned that leaning on someone else did not make her weak, and he learned that letting someone in did not make him less capable. Their bond deepened not through words, but through countless small actions, bringing food, listening quietly, running errands, offering a hand when the other stumbled. It was during these times that they began to understand the true meaning of love. Not love as shown in movies, where passion and drama dominate. Not love built on promises that could easily be broken. But a quiet, patient love built in the small, steady acts of care and understanding. One evening, as they walked slowly down a familiar street, the sun setting behind the buildings, she looked at him and said softly, "I think this is what love can be. Quiet, steady, and always there." He nodded, feeling the weight of the truth in her words. "I think you're right," he replied. "It's not always easy, but it feels real." And in that moment, neither needed to say more. They understood each other, and that understanding was stronger than any words could be. Their love was not yet perfect, not yet complete, but it was growing, rooted in trust, patience, and the quiet care they gave each other every day through hardship. Through small joys, through simple acts of kindness, they were discovering that love could be both ordinary and extraordinary. It could survive storms, struggles, and fears. It could grow quietly, patiently, and strongly, becoming something neither of them had expected but both had begun to cherish deeply. By the end of that time, they were no longer simply two people who met by chance. They were two hearts learning how to support, protect, and care for each other in a world that often made little sense. And in that learning, they found the first real taste of what true love could feel like: steady, patient, and quietly powerful. Life had been testing them in ways neither of them could have anticipated. The quiet, steady bond they had built began to face pressures that threatened to shake its foundation. It started slowly with small misunderstandings that neither knew how to navigate. Words that were left unsaid, intentions that were assumed wrong, and fears that were left unspoken began to grow between them like cracks in a wall. He had always been careful, measured in his words and actions, but the stress of keeping the workshop running was starting to wear him down. Clients complained more often, bills kept piling up, and every small success seemed to be followed by another challenge. He had learned to carry his burdens quietly, but the weight was heavy, and he sometimes felt invisible. Even to her, she too was struggling. Her mother's condition had worsened again, requiring more care and more time. She wanted to be strong, to handle everything on her own, but exhaustion was beginning to show on her face. Nights were long, filled with worry and fear. She began to withdraw slightly, thinking that if she carried the burden alone, she would not inconvenience anyone else. But in doing so, she unintentionally created a distance between them. Their meetings, once a source of comfort, became shorter and less frequent. When they did see each other, small tensions would surface. A word spoken the wrong way, a pause that lasted too long, or a small frustration could ignite a quiet argument. They loved each other, yes, but love alone could not fix everything that life was throwing at them. One evening, he had worked late, repairing an old dresser that had been left in terrible condition. By the time he walked home, his hands were sore and his back ached. He passed by the street corner where they sometimes met, hoping to see her, but she was not there. He felt a pang of disappointment he didn't want to admit. He reminded himself that she had responsibilities. That life was hard for her too, but still, the absence left a hollow feeling in his chest. She, on the other hand, had spent the day rushing between the pharmacy, the store, and her mother's appointments. When she finally had a moment to rest, she thought of him, of the small kindnesses he had shown, and of how he had always been there. But she also felt a frustration. She did not want to share a frustration with life, with the constant struggle, and with the small misunderstandings that had begun to creep into their relationship. When they finally met that evening, their conversation was short and awkward. He spoke about work. She spoke about her mother. Neither knew how to reach across the growing distance. A small disagreement about something trivial, the timing of a meeting. The way an errand had been handled escalated into a quiet tension. They parted that night with heavy hearts, each thinking the other had changed. For a few days they avoided their usual meetings. Silence replaced the small smiles and shared moments. Friends and neighbors began to notice the change, offering quiet advice or asking questions. But neither felt ready to talk, each afraid of being vulnerable, each fearing that opening up might lead to more hurt. During this time, he realized how much her presence had become part of his life. The quiet walks, the shared errands, the small meals, the comforting words, they were not just moments. They were anchors in his chaotic world. Yet he also felt frustration and helplessness. He did not know how to bridge the gap, how to reach her without making things worse. She, too, felt the emptiness. Her life had grown harder, and she realized how much his quiet support had meant to her. Even in her exhaustion, she missed the small ways he made life lighter, carrying heavy bags, helping with errands, simply being there. She knew she had begun to rely on him in ways she had never admitted. But fear and pride kept her from reaching out. A week later, serious misunderstanding finally forced them to confront the tension. A message had been misinterpreted, and assumptions had built up over days of silence. He felt she was blaming him for things beyond his control. She felt he had not understood the struggles she had been carrying alone. The argument was quiet but intense. A battle of unspoken emotions finally surfacing. "You don't understand how hard this is for me," she said, her voice trembling. "I've been trying," he replied quietly, his own frustration rising. "I'm doing everything I can, just like you are." They stood facing each other, the air thick with emotion, neither wanting to hurt the other, but both feeling the pressure of unspoken fears. For a moment, it seemed like the distance between them might never close. Then, in the quiet that followed, they realized something important. Their frustration was not about each other. It was about life and its challenges. They were both exhausted, both afraid, both trying to survive. Love had brought them together, but it could not shield them from hardship. What they needed now was understanding, patience, and honesty. Slowly, they began to talk not just about the misunderstanding, but about their fears, their exhaustion, the weight they each carried. He spoke about the pressure of keeping the workshop running, the fear of failure, and the loneliness of carrying so much responsibility. She spoke about her mother's illness, the constant worry, and the fear of being overwhelmed. As they shared, they began to listen, not just with their ears, but with their hearts. Words that had been left unsaid found a voice, and assumptions that had built walls between them began to crumble. They realized that the tension had not come from a lack of love, but from the struggle of life itself. In the days that followed, they made small but important changes. He began to share his worries openly, allowing her to understand the weight he carried. She began to accept help without guilt, realizing that leaning on someone else did not make her weak. They both learned to communicate more clearly, to express their feelings before assumptions could take hold. They also learned the importance of small moments of care. A cup of tea left on a table, a message sent during a busy day, a simple "I'm here." These acts became their way of reminding each other that, even in hard times, they were not alone. Life did not become easier overnight. Bills still piled up, work still brought challenges, and her mother's health still demanded attention. But the distance that had begun to grow between them had been replaced by a deeper understanding. They were learning that love was not about avoiding problems, but about facing them together. One evening, after a particularly long day, they walked together in the park. The sun was setting, casting a golden light over the quiet streets. She held a small umbrella, shielding them both from a light drizzle. They walked slowly, not speaking much, but the silence was no longer heavy. It was calm, comforting, a shared space where words were not always necessary, she said softly. "I used to think love was only about happiness. But now I see. It's also about patience and support, and staying even when it's hard." He looked at her and nodded. "I've been learning the same thing. Love isn't about avoiding trouble. It's about facing it together, even when it feels too heavy." They paused on a small bridge, watching the water flow quietly beneath them. In that moment, they understood that their love was stronger than the challenges they faced. It was not perfect, and it was not always easy, but it was real. It had been tested, and it had survived. In the following weeks, they continued to support each other in practical ways. He helped with errands, carried groceries, and fixed things around her house. She cooked meals for him, offered encouragement, and stayed by his side during long nights at the workshop. Each act, no matter how small, reinforced the bond they had built. They also learned to forgive each other quickly, to address misunderstandings before they grew into walls. They realized that silence, while sometimes necessary, could also create distance. Speaking honestly, even when it was difficult, became a new habit. Friends and neighbors noticed the change. The quiet tension that had begun to shadow their relationship was gone, replaced by a calm confidence in their connection. They were no longer afraid to lean on each other, to show vulnerability, or to express care. Their love had been tested, and it had grown stronger for it. One rainy evening, they found themselves walking home together, drenched but smiling. She laughed as he tried to shield her with his coat, and he smiled at her laughter. Feeling a warmth in his chest he had not felt before, they realized that even in the storms of life, they could find moments of joy. Moments that reminded them why they were together. By the end of that part of their story, they had learned a crucial lesson. Love was not only about happiness and shared smiles. It was also about enduring hardships, understanding each other's struggles, and staying together even when life felt overwhelming. They had faced a breaking point, and instead of breaking, they had grown closer, their bond deeper and more resilient than ever. In the quiet moments, in the acts of patience and care, they were beginning to understand what true love really looked like, not in perfection, not in drama, but in the simple, steadfast choice to stay by each other's side. No matter what challenges came, time passed, and their lives slowly began to settle into a rhythm, though it was far from easy. The challenges that had tested them before did not disappear, but the way they faced them together had changed everything. They had learned to support each other in ways that were quiet yet powerful, to understand without judgment and to care without expectation. This was the true shape of love they had been building, piece by piece. Through small acts of patience, understanding, and courage, he continued to run his small workshop, still repairing old furniture, still feeling the weight of responsibility every day. But now he no longer carried the burden alone. She had become a steady presence in his life, offering help, encouragement, and a sense of calm that he had never known before. On mornings when he felt defeated, she would bring a simple cup of tea, sit with him for a few quiet moments, and remind him, without words, that he was not alone. Those small gestures lifted him more than any praise or recognition ever could. She, too, had begun to accept that asking for help was not weakness. Her mother's health continued to require care, but she realized that sharing responsibility did not lessen her strength that allowed her to endure, to keep going when things felt impossible. He became her anchor, not in a way that controlled her life, but in a way that supported it. Together, they managed the daily struggles that had once seemed overwhelming, and in that management, they found a quiet joy. One afternoon, as they walked through the narrow streets toward a small park nearby, they noticed the familiar sights of their neighborhood: the small flower shop, the corner store, the children playing in the puddles after a light rain. These simple things reminded them of how far they had come. "It feels different now," she said softly. "I don't feel as lost as I used to." He smiled, glancing at her. "Neither do I. Life is still hard, but it doesn't feel unbearable anymore. Not when you're around." Her heart warmed at his words, and she realized how much they had come to depend on each other, not in a way that trapped them, but in a way that made life fuller, richer, and more meaningful. Their days became filled with small routines that strengthened their bond. He would leave early for the workshop, sometimes stopping to pick up ingredients for her mother's meals, while she managed the household and her part-time job. They would meet in the evenings, sharing stories, laughter, or simply quiet companionship. On weekends, they sometimes sat in the park, watching life unfold around them, speaking little, but feeling everything deeply. It was during these ordinary moments that the extraordinary truth of their love revealed itself. They realized that love was not measured by grand gestures or dramatic moments, but by the consistency of care, the choice to be present, and the willingness to face life's hardships together. One evening, a small crisis brought this understanding into sharp focus. She received a call from the doctor about her mother. A test result was not what they had hoped, and panic threatened to overtake her. Without thinking, she called him. He arrived within minutes, carrying a bag of warm food and a calm presence that steadied her. He did not have all the answers, but he sat beside her, held her hand, and listened as she poured out her fears. "Whatever happens," he said softly, "we will face it together. You are not alone." Those words, simple and quiet, carried more weight than any promise she had ever received. She felt a relief that brought tears to her eyes. In that moment, she knew that true love was not about perfect circumstances, but about choosing to stay, to support, and to care. Even when life was uncertain, the days that followed were filled with challenges, but they faced each one together. He helped with medicines, managed errands, and ensured that her mother had what she needed. She, in turn, offered small acts of kindness, cooking meals for him, helping organize the workshop, and always providing encouragement. They were partners in the truest sense, not because they had declared it, but because their actions proved it every day. Through these experiences, they discovered another truth. Love grows not only in joy, but also in struggle. Every problem they faced, every sleepless night, and every worry became an opportunity to strengthen their bond. They began to understand that the heart of love was patience, understanding, and the quiet willingness to endure hardships together. One evening, after a particularly long day, they walked to the small bridge near the park, a place they had visited often. The sun was setting, casting a warm glow over the water, and the streets were quiet. She looked at him and said softly, "I never imagined love could feel like this. Calm, steady, strong in ways I didn't know were possible." He smiled, feeling the same depth of understanding. "It's not about grand declarations or perfect days," he said. "It's about showing up. Every day, no matter what." They stood there for a while, watching the reflection of the sky in the water, letting the silence speak the words neither could fully express. In that silence they found comfort, peace, and the knowledge that their love had been tested and had endured. Months passed, and life continued its quiet rhythm. They celebrated small victories together: a repaired chair, a successful day at the workshop, a good report from the doctor. They also endured losses, setbacks, and worries, but each one brought them closer. Teaching them to lean on each other and find strength in companionship, their neighbors began to notice the change in them. The quiet tension that had once shadowed their lives was gone, replaced by a steady presence, a sense of calm confidence in their connection. They were no longer simply two people managing life separately. They were a team, bound not by words alone, but by actions, care, and shared understanding. One day, she found a small note tucked into a book she was reading. It was simple, written in his careful handwriting. "Thank you for being my strength when I could not find my own. For being my calm in storms. For being here." She held the note close, tears in her eyes, realizing that this quiet, patient, steadfast love was more powerful than anything she had ever imagined. She understood now that love was not about excitement, not about dramatic gestures, but about showing up every day in small but meaningful ways. He, too, reflected on their journey. He had once believed love was unreliable, something to be feared. But now he knew that love could be strong, gentle, and enduring. It was not a feeling that came and went with circumstances. It was a choice, made quietly, consistently, and without expectation of reward. They did not need a special day or a grand celebration to recognize what they had built. Every shared meal, every quiet conversation, every act of care was a celebration of their bond. And in these ordinary moments, they found something extraordinary: the truth of love in its purest form. One evening, as they sat together on the bench in the park, the world around them glowing in the last light of the sun, she looked at him and smiled. "I think I understand now," she said softly. This is what love really looks like. Not in grand moments, but in everything we do for each other." He reached out and held her hand, feeling the steady warmth and reassurance of her presence. "Yes," he said quietly. "It's not perfect. It's not always easy, but it is real, and it's ours." In the days, weeks, and months that followed, they continued their life together in this way. Challenges came, as they always would, but they faced them together. Joys came, small and large, and they celebrated them with gratitude. Through it all, they remained patient, kind, and steadfast, showing each other that true love is not measured by perfection, but by the willingness to be present, to support, and to care without expectation. Their story, quiet and unassuming, became a testament to what love really is. It was not loud or dramatic. It was not about perfect moments or flawless days. It was about two people choosing each day to stay, to support, and to care for one another. By the end, they had learned the greatest lesson of all. True love is not something that happens to you. It is something you build brick by brick through patience, understanding, and unwavering presence. It is found not in grand gestures, but in small acts of kindness, in the quiet moments, and in the choice to stand together, no matter what life brings. And so their life continued. Ordinary, yet extraordinary. Simple, yet profound. Every day was a testament to the love they had nurtured, love that had grown in patience, strengthened through struggle, and endured through time. This, they realized, was what true love really looks like. Time moved on. Their lives had settled into a rhythm that was both ordinary and deeply meaningful. They had faced challenges, shared small joys, and learned that love was not a grand spectacle but a quiet, patient, and steady presence. Yet life had a way of testing them in ways they did not expect, reminding them that love, no matter how strong, must grow and adapt through every storm. One morning he woke earlier than usual. The streets were still quiet, and the sky carried the soft colors of dawn. He walked to his workshop, the familiar sounds of hammers and saws greeting him, but his mind was heavy. The workload had increased significantly, with more clients and larger projects. Each day was a test of endurance, patience, and skill. He often felt exhausted, but this morning, exhaustion was mixed with a new sense of worry. The workshop was stable, but he wanted to grow it not just for himself, but for the life they were slowly building together. He knew that to secure their future, he would have to take risks he had avoided before. She, meanwhile, had begun her day tending to her mother. Her mother's health had been fragile for some time, and caring for her required constant attention. She moved quietly through the house, preparing breakfast, arranging medicines, and ensuring everything was in order. There was no complaint in her movements, only a quiet determination that had become second nature. She, too, had begun thinking about their future, the possibility of building a life together beyond the streets and the struggles, a life where love and security could coexist. Their first meeting of the day was not in a dramatic moment, but in the ordinary space of life. She stopped by the workshop to bring him breakfast, a small act of care that spoke volumes. He looked up from the half-repaired table he was working on, a smile forming on his face despite the stress lingering in his eyes. "You didn't have to," said softly. "I wanted to," she replied simply. "You work too hard. You need to eat." It was moments like these that reminded them both of the quiet power of their bond. No grand words, no promises shouted to the world, just presence, care, and understanding. They had learned that these simple actions carried more weight than any dramatic gesture ever could. Over the next few weeks, the workshop began to grow. More clients arrived, attracted by the care and skill he put into each piece of furniture. Some offered large orders, others small, but each one required dedication. He worked long hours, sometimes late into the night, and she continued to support him, quietly bringing meals, offering encouragement. In helping manage the little details that allowed him to focus on his work life, however, was never without struggle. One evening, a serious problem arose. A shipment of materials that had been ordered for a large project did not arrive on time. The client was upset, and the pressure fell heavily on him. He felt frustration, worry, and a creeping sense of helplessness. She noticed the tension immediately, standing quietly by his side. "It's not the end," she said softly, placing a hand on his shoulder. "We'll find a way." Her words were not a solution, but they were enough to steady him. He realized once again that her presence was a kind of strength he could lean on, a quiet support that allowed him to face difficulties without collapsing. They spent the evening problem-solving together, working out alternative plans, calling suppliers, and adjusting schedules. By the end of the night, the crisis had not disappeared completely, but it was manageable. In the midst of these practical challenges, their personal connection deepened. They had learned to communicate openly, to share fears without shame, and to accept help without guilt. Arguments that might have seemed significant in other circumstances were now met with patience and understanding. They realized that the heart of love was not avoiding conflict, but addressing it with care, empathy, and honesty. One afternoon, she suggested a small break from the routine. They walked to the park, enjoying the sunlight and the soft breeze. The world around them seemed to pause for a while. Children played, birds sang, and the noise of the city faded into a gentle hum. They found a quiet bench near the fountain and sat together, sharing a simple lunch she had prepared. "I sometimes forget how beautiful these small moments are," she said quietly. Looking at the water, he nodded, taking in the scene. "I know. Life can be so full of worries that we forget to notice the simple joys." It was in these moments, unremarkable yet profound, that they realized the depth of their connection. Love, they discovered, was not always about passion or excitement. It was about noticing, appreciating, and valuing the everyday moments that built a life together. As weeks turned into months, they faced new challenges. Her mother's health required more attention, sometimes demanding her time and energy unexpectedly. He had to manage multiple projects simultaneously, each requiring focus and precision. There were moments of exhaustion, of frustration, and of fear that they might not be able to keep up. Yet each challenge was met together. He would take on additional tasks to ease her burden, running errands for her household, making sure her mother had everything needed, and taking care of unexpected problems that arose. She, in turn, supported him by organizing his schedule, managing paperwork, and providing encouragement when he felt overwhelmed. Their partnership was seamless, not because it was perfect, but because it was built on mutual respect, understanding, and care. One day, a significant opportunity came to him. A client wanted a large, complex project that could take his workshop to a new level. The opportunity was exciting but also daunting. It required long hours, precise work, and careful coordination. He hesitated, worried that the demands might be too great. She noticed his hesitation and said softly, "You can do it, and I'll be here every step of the way." Her words were simple, yet they carried immense strength. He realized that no challenge was too great as long as they faced it together. With her support, he accepted the project, determined to give it his best. The following weeks were intense, filled with long hours, careful planning, and the occasional moment of doubt. Yet, through it all, they relied on each other. Finding strength in their partnership, their days became a rhythm of work, care, and shared moments. Even when exhausted, they made time for small gestures: a cup of tea, a shared meal, a quiet conversation. Each act reinforced the bond they had built, reminding them that love was not a single grand moment, but a continuous series of choices to support, understand, and stand together. As the project neared completion, their lives began to change. The workshop gained recognition, and their community noticed the quality and dedication in his work. Their combined efforts created a life that was not only sustainable, but also meaningful. They celebrated these successes quietly, not with fanfare, but with gratitude for what they had achieved together. Through all of this, they never lost sight of the small joys that had brought them together. They walked through the streets of their neighborhood, shared meals in the park, and found laughter in everyday moments. They understood that life's happiness was not found only in accomplishments, but in the shared experiences that made each day special. One evening, as they sat together on their favorite bench, the city quiet around them, she spoke softly. "I never imagined life could feel so full, Not perfect, but full of meaning. He looked at her, a gentle smile on his face. It's not perfect, no, but it is ours. And that makes it enough. In that simple acknowledgement, they realized the essence of their journey. They had faced hardship, uncertainty, and doubt. They had grown through struggle, patience, and quiet care. And through it all, they had discovered what true love really is. Not a fleeting feeling, but a steadfast presence, built in everyday choices, small acts of support, and the courage to stay together through all of life's storms. Over time, they began to plan for a future that felt both realistic and hopeful. Their bond had become the foundation for dreams they had once thought impossible. Life where love and responsibility coexisted, where work and care were shared, and where each day brought new opportunities to support one another. Even when setbacks came, they faced them with resilience. A sudden illness, an unexpected problem at the workshop, or a worry about family finances no longer caused despair. They had learned to face these moments together, with patience, understanding, and the quiet strength of knowing they were not alone. They also found joy in the ordinary. A shared meal, a small act of kindness, a quiet conversation, or simply sitting together in the evening became profound experiences. They celebrated life's beauty in these moments, understanding that true love does not always announce itself, it reveals itself in consistent, patient, and caring actions. One day, as they walked hand in hand through the streets they had long known, she stopped and said softly, "I think I understand now. Love is not only about feeling, it's about choosing every day to be here for each other." He squeezed her hand gently. "Yes, it's about showing up, even when life is hard, even when nothing seems perfect. That's what makes it real." Their eyes met, and in that quiet, shared understanding, they knew they had reached a new level of connection. Love had grown beyond the early stages of attraction, beyond the tests of hardship, into something enduring, patient, and deeply rooted in trust and care by the end of this stage of their journey. They had learned the full meaning of love in its quiet, steadfast form. It was not about grand gestures, dramatic declarations, or perfect moments. It was about showing up, staying present, offering support, and caring without expectation. It was about facing life together, building a shared future, and finding joy in the simple, ordinary, and meaningful moments. They had created a life that was rich, not in wealth or recognition, but in trust, understanding, and quiet happiness. Every day was a testament to the love they had nurtured, a love that had grown through hardship, strengthened by patience, and sustained by the simple, steady choice to remain together. And in the end, they realized that this was the essence of true love, not the moments that are seen by the world, but the daily acts of care, support, and unwavering presence that create a life worth living together. Their story, simple yet profound, stood as proof that true love is not found in perfection, but in the choice to stand together every day. Through all of life's challenges and joys, life had a way of testing even the strongest bonds. And by now, they had learned that love was not a destination but a journey full of unexpected turns, quiet victories, and small struggles. Over the past months, their relationship had grown deeper and steadier, shaped not by grand gestures, but by the everyday acts of care, patience, and understanding. Yet even in the strongest relationships, life sometimes brings challenges that feel heavier than before. One morning, he woke to the sound of rain tapping gently against the window. The streets were wet and empty, and the world seemed slower, quieter. He walked to the workshop, feeling a mix of anticipation and unease. There was a new opportunity waiting for him, a large order that could provide stability for months, but it also carried risk. The materials would need to arrive on time. The work had to be precise, and there was no room for error. He began to plan carefully, making lists, calculating time, and preparing himself for the long hours ahead. But even as he worked, a nagging worry stayed in the back of his mind. What if something went wrong? What if he could not meet the expectations? The weight of responsibility felt heavier than ever. She arrived mid-morning, carrying a basket of fresh fruit and some warm bread. She had noticed the tension in his face the moment he opened the door. Without saying much, she placed the food on his workbench, offered a small, encouraging smile, helped him organize the space. "You don't have to carry it all alone," she said softly. Standing beside him, he looked at her, feeling the familiar warmth and calm her presence always brought. "I know," he replied, "but I still worry." "Worry doesn't fix anything," she said gently. "Let's focus on what we can do together." Her words were simple, yet they carried a quiet strength that steadied him. Together they went through the plan step by step. She helped organize supplies, check the inventory, and even made small adjustments to the schedule to make the workload manageable. By the end of the morning, the weight in his chest felt lighter, not because the work was easier, but because he was not facing it alone. Days turned into weeks, and the project demanded their full attention. Long hours, unexpected delays, and small mistakes tested their patience and endurance. At times, the stress was overwhelming. He felt the pressure of deadlines and the fear of failure, while she balanced the growing responsibilities at home and the constant concern for her mother's health. Yet, through it all, they learned to communicate openly. When frustration threatened to overwhelm him, he could speak it aloud. She would listen without judgment, offering encouragement and perspective. When exhaustion made her weary, she could rely on him to step in, to carry part of the burden, and to remind her that she was not alone. One evening, after a particularly long day, they sat together on the small bench near the park. The streets were quiet, the rain had stopped, and the air smelled fresh with damp earth. They were both tired, their bodies aching, but there was a sense of calm between them. "I never thought life could be this hard," she said quietly. "It is hard," he replied, "but somehow it feels possible when you're here." Her hand found his, and they sat in silence, drawing strength from each other's presence. It was in moments like these that they realized the depth of their bond, not in words or promises, but in the simple act of being together, steady and reliable, no matter the circumstances. The following week brought a new challenge. A sudden problem with a shipment delayed part of the project, threatening to push deadlines back. He felt the familiar weight of worry and fear, but this time he did not face it alone. She arrived at the workshop early, offering her help before he even had to ask. Together, they worked through the issue, making calls, rearranging priorities, and finding creative solutions. By the evening, the immediate problem was solved. And while the work was not perfect, it was manageable. That night, as they walked home together, they talked quietly about their fears and hopes. They realized that true love was not about avoiding difficulties, but about facing them together hand in hand with trust and patience. Each obstacle they overcame strengthened their bond, teaching them that partnership meant sharing both burdens and joys equally. In the weeks that followed, they began to notice small changes in each other. He became more patient with her when she was tired or worried, understanding that her exhaustion was not a reflection of her feelings for him. She became more confident in speaking up about her own needs, trusting that he would listen and support her. These small shifts, though subtle, deepened their connection and made their relationship more resilient. One afternoon, they decided to take a break from the demands of life and visit a quiet hill on the outskirts of the city. The walk was long, but the view at the top was worth every step. The sun was low, casting a golden glow over the landscape, and the city below seemed peaceful from their vantage point. They sat together on a large rock, catching their breath and sharing a simple meal she had packed. "It feels like the world is smaller up here," she said, smiling. "Maybe it is," he replied. "Or maybe it's just that we can see it differently when we're together." They laughed softly, and for a moment, all worries and pressures faded. It was in these moments of quiet joy that they discovered the true meaning of companionship. Love, they realized, was not always about excitement or passion. It was about shared understanding, trust, and the ability to find peace together, even in the midst of life's chaos. As they descended the hill and returned to the city, they carried this sense of calm with them. They returned to their routines, work, care for family, and daily life, but with a renewed sense of partnership. Challenges still arose, but they approached them with patience and perspective. Knowing that they could face anything together, a few months later, they received news that brought both relief and hope. The large project at the workshop had been completed successfully, and the client was satisfied. The work was recognized in the local community, bringing new opportunities and stability. It was a moment of quiet triumph, not celebrated with fanfare. But with gratitude and shared pride, they spent that evening walking through their neighborhood. Reflecting on how far they had come, they remembered the early days of uncertainty, the moments of misunderstanding, the nights filled with worry, and the quiet triumphs that had carried them forward. Every step was a reminder of the strength they had built together, not just in love, but in trust, understanding, and shared effort. Even with success, life continued to present challenges. Her mother's health required ongoing care, unexpected expenses arose, and the workshop demanded constant attention. Yet, they faced each difficulty with the knowledge that they were not alone. Each day brought new opportunities to show care, patience, and understanding. Each moment became a testament to the quiet, enduring power of their love. One evening, as they sat by the fountain in the park, the city lights reflecting in the water, she spoke softly. "I never imagined love could feel this steady. Not perfect, not easy, but enough." He looked at her, feeling the truth of her words in his chest. "It is enough," he said quietly. "It's more than enough, because it's real. And we're building it every day, together." They sat in silence, holding hands, watching the water ripple in the gentle breeze. In that quiet companionship, they understood the essence of what they had been learning all along. Now, love is not defined by dramatic moments or perfect circumstances, but by the willingness to stay, support, and care for one another every single day in the following weeks. They continued their life with the same steady dedication. Each day was filled with small acts of kindness, bringing meals, running errands, fixing problems, and sharing moments of laughter and conversation. These acts, though ordinary, carried the extraordinary weight of love built over time. They also found moments to dream together. They spoke quietly of a future that included a home of their own, a place where care and love could flourish without constant worry. They imagined a life where work and family were balanced, where challenges were faced together, and where joy could be found in the simplest moments. Through it all, they never lost sight of the lessons they had learned. They understood that love required patience, trust, and resilience. They knew that hardships would continue to come, but they also knew that facing them together made life more bearable, more meaningful, and more fulfilling. One night, as they walked home through the quiet streets, she said softly, "I think I finally understand what true love really is. It's not perfect. It's not always easy, but it's steady, patient, and present. And it grows stronger with every challenge we face together." He nodded, feeling the depth of her words. "Yes," he replied. "It's not about the big gestures or grand promises. It's about showing up every day, no matter what. That's what makes it real. That's what makes it ours." By now, they had become inseparable, not just in presence, but in purpose. Their partnership had grown beyond the simple comfort of companionship into a shared commitment to face life together. They had learned to navigate challenges with patience, to celebrate successes with gratitude, and to find joy in the small, ordinary moments that made life meaningful. Their story, though quiet and unassuming to the outside world, was profound in its lessons. It was a testament to the power of love built on trust, care, and shared experience. It was proof that true love does not always announce itself with drama or fanfare. It reveals itself in the small, consistent choices to stand by each other, to support one another, and to nurture a life together. As the city lights glimmered and the streets settled into quiet calm, they walked hand in hand, feeling the strength of the bond they had cultivated. Life would continue to bring challenges, joys, and unexpected twists, but they were ready. They had discovered that love is not a fleeting feeling, but a living, breathing presence nurtured through patience, care, and shared understanding. And in that quiet certainty, they found peace. They knew that no matter what the future held, they would face it together with courage, patience, and unwavering love. This was the reality of their journey, a love that had been tested, strengthened, and built to endure. They had found what so many search for, and it was not in the grand, dramatic moments, but in the steady, patient, and caring life they had chosen to create together. This love, grounded in reality, yet extraordinary in its consistency, became the foundation for everything they would face in the days to come. It was not perfect, but it was theirs real, enduring, and beautiful in its quiet strength.